Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of The Last Hit. We are here on March 6th, just after the final games of week number 7. I'm joined by Ox and Lyric, my constant co-host. Guys, checking in on you as we go 2 weeks away from the playoffs of LPL. Ox, welcome to Last Hit. How you feeling?
I'm pretty good. I feel like the split has gone so fast at this point. It still feels like week 3, but yep, 2 weeks left. Crazy, as is our game. Lyric, checking in on you after having casted the last 2 games of the night. You all right? You hanging in there?
Look,
you got your coffee?
Look, it's been a tragic week because Mole started, Mole lost, and honestly, when Mole loses, life sucks. So
at least you got to be there for it. I mean, that's something. You got to watch it unfold.
You know,
your buff didn't help him, but
you know it's okay because my call for Mole was always winning worlds. It's spring. You don't win worlds in spring. You win worlds in summer.
It's a long game.
So you're right. I can cope.
Yeah, I can tell. Your face definitely doesn't look worried whatsoever. But let's go ahead and get to the nitty-gritty. We have finally had our first teams locking in playoffs. We've got RNG, V5, and Weibo Gaming, all 3 getting a playoff berth in the spring 2022 season. Unfortunately for LNG, tonight it was their chance to join that top 4 group, but they fell short.
Yeah, LNG... I don't know. I mean, we obviously just came off that series. That series just happened. We were just chatting beforehand, like LNG's Game 3 draft, a bit confusing. LNG picking the Viego 2 times in a row, which, you know, I think is just a takeaway from TN and being like, haha, we're taking your best jungler. But I don't know if it's much of a takeaway when it literally does absolutely nothing in the game at all. Loses lane, does nothing.
Just to clarify, if people didn't see it, it was Viego top, not jungle, that they took away.
Yep. So. Just to throw in a little bit of craziness there.
I just feel like that draft made so little sense in Game 3, but I don't know, man. I feel like LNG, there was so much hype coming in the season, 7-0. It's like, oh, look at this team, they're so good. Tarzan, Doinby. And then it's like, you know, there were elements of the roster that were underperforming for sure. Like, I was like not convinced, but at least I was like Tarzan is on point, and I feel like even he's been a little bit lackluster in the recent series. Like it feels like the past couple of weeks they've just gotten stomped on repeat by everyone but TT. So you know,
yeah, there you go. I was just saying,
even his smites have not been on point, which is just so weird,
that's
right?
The scary part.
He's been getting outsmited. Hysterics told me they're both right.
Outsmitten.
Yeah,
I just love to see the gears turning.
They're both right.
I'm here
but
for.
Yeah, I feel like in almost all of their recent series, we've seen Tarzan lose like a smite fight where the enemy jungler just literally walks up and smites. Not like flashes over the pit, nothing. Just walks up in his face, presses smite, and you're like, what is going on, dude?
And I saw Ashin was tweeting that, you know, LG haven't been able to beat any of the top 5 teams. Also, they're on a horrible slump for themselves, and they still have some opportunities to lock in the playoffs. At least they had that huge win streak at the beginning of the season to help them out. But you're definitely looking at LNG with some question mark pings going into the last 2 weeks for sure. But they haven't locked in playoffs. So let's scoot them out of the conversation. Let's talk about our big 3. As tonight we did have V5 locking in. And because of their win, RNG do lock in as well. Weibo having locked in their first, I guess the first playoff berth in the LPL last night.
Yeah, and, you know, I'll kind of start. I think we can start on Weibo because Weibo are such a weird team in their recent series because
they really
it feels
are.
like Weibo have just decided in their recent series, like, okay, one game, we're just going to absolutely troll. They played against LGD to lock it in. It was game 2 where they're picking the Zillion.
Lightly.
It's super cool. And they're like 4K gold up at 15 minutes. And they just start running in one by one to the enemy jungle, like getting picked off. There was the earlier series they had this, but I can't remember who it was against, where they were trying to like save a top lane dive or something, and once again SOFM jumps in first, dies, the Shy jumps in, dies, kind of rinse and repeat. Overall, I don't think it's too big of like a worrying sign. This team is just weird. I think a lot of their strengths are still there in terms of like their strong laners. SOFM's still not super proactive in the early game, which I think set up for RNG to beat them with those early dives to bot. But I don't know. I think Weibo are still one of the teams you are going to have more confidence in for quality of play and just overall the shot calling coming through. Oh, and Sword Art debuted. I won't talk about that. Someone else can talk about that.
Yeah.
There you go.
Wholesome Brother Gaming is back in town, man.
I don't know. I feel like it's such a weird one. Like dropping the game against LGD as well. I don't know. Like, this is obviously one of our top
come
teams.
on, don't worry about that.
This
That's
is
just a
obviously-
bump in the road.
It's like our top teams. We're gonna be more critical, but it really feels like it's not just them. It's V5 as well. Just it's like they
It
do a bit
really
of
is.
trolling. It's like
The circle. It's the circle, man. I'm not. It's just a wonderful world in the LPL.
And it's like some series we get, and it's like, okay, this is what we expect fully. This is like very convincing. And then some series, I'm like, how is it even possible that you're dropping that game? Like, it's just perplexing. And I mean, I feel like RNG, I'm more convinced of. But then they had that series against R8, and I was like, what the hell was
Yeah.
that? So I feel like, you know, especially compared to the LCK where they have T1, who's like undefeated. And yes, you know, in some games, they're not flawless and everything, but
Yeah.
it feels like they wrap things up quite well. I feel like in the LPL, all our top teams, it just feels like, you know, there's a couple of series where they just, I'm not sure what's going on. I don't know if, you know, they just decide to run it a bit.
So,
if they're like, let's try something.
For
It's just-
clarity, I feel like this is not obviously like the main contributor, but I feel like one of the reasons why we see this happen in LPL every split is with the schedule, right? Like, I feel like a lot in the schedule we'll see a team like play one day, the break the next day, and then play the other. And I feel like, right, there has to be cutting corners somewhere in terms of where you're going to put your time and resources into prep. And
Yeah.
I mean, it feels like for the smarter teams, maybe not for the smarter teams, for a lot of the top teams, right, it's against those bottom tier teams. I'd much rather be Weibo and V5 dropping games to nobodies
Yeah.
than like LNG right now, right? Heading into
To
playoffs, being like,
nobodies.
my God, who do we play against?
Woo! Woo!
I said it.
Oh,
I
this
said
is
it.
I mean,
spicy.
the thing is, you say that, but even so, like we saw V5 drop to JDG, right? And
That's
I feel like
true.
they're not.
Yeah, true.
They're
GG aren't
not-
nobodies.
That was
No.
yeah. No. I think that might be a little worrisome. You might
Yeah,
get
then we saw
shoot
Weibo
out
drop
of
to
here.
RNG, and that one was
I want to go back to Weibo a little bit though, because the Shy, although he has been returning to form, you can say that twice as well, because in the last couple series, there's been a couple times it's a little bit iffy on some
That's
of the
just the
plays, a
Shy,
little
though.
bit back.
I feel
That's
like-
what I'm saying. Like, but he seems so stable this year. Now you're starting to see some of those crazy flip flops that we know him
To
for.
be fair,
You know-
I don't feel like any of the Shy's like ints or flip flops have been like really game losing or detrimental though. I feel like that is
True.
one big difference.
I will
True.
say that the TP Ghost grasp Victor top felt a little bit game losing. I think that,
I'll give you that one.
How you gonna get? Yeah, I was gonna say, where's the rebuttal?
Dude, I feel like it's such a talent, because like if you're a player who's like your reputation is you're flawless, then when you have a bad game, like Tarzan, right? Tarzan right
Yeah.
now, we just talked about him. Like,
Yep.
dude, Tarzan's looking rough, and this is so uncharacteristic. The Shy could literally int so hard in a series, and we're like, that's just the Shy. Like,
That's
he's
just
built
the
this
Shy.
reputation.
That's the
what
thing,
he's
though.
gonna
They
do.
built
Genius
up
branding, genius
in
branding.
the past. Exactly.
Sprint a few games every split and just really make people think, okay,
Why doesn't every pro player do this? Come
it's
on,
not.
this,
It's
this
great.
needs
It's good.
to be branding 101 for esports players from now
you
on.
immune.
It's your first couple years, but make sure you make pop-off plays too. So the conversation for Weibo, obviously very, very proper for them to have gotten the first playoff berth in the LPL, but now V5 themselves struggling a little bit. They could have locked it in before. They could have been the first ones, but they weren't. They finally do so, though, tonight. And the team as a whole still finding some struggling with their transitioning early game blowouts into actual victories.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like the series. I mean, it's against Ultra Prime, right? I feel like the first game there was a couple of mistakes, but it was mostly okay. Second game was just a crush, but I mean, that JDG series really,
Yeah.
it's kind of just mind blowing that they actually lost from that point. That's the thing. I mean, I feel like it happens so often. Particularly, I think Jinx is just such a problem. Like, there's so many games where like the stronger team will prioritize, you know, things like Hecarim and various other picks that are understandably prioritized earlier, and then the weaker team will just take Jinx. And then you make a mistake, suddenly Jinx gets a reset, wins a team fight, you get all the gold bounties, you get an objective bounty, you get like a Baron or something, and it's like, okay, now the game's over. And I feel like this happens so often where, like, you know, obviously a good team with Jinx can do a lot, but I feel like if you're a weaker team, picking Jinx is just like the best way to upset.
Yeah, kind of like a free get out of jail free. I mean, I loved your guys' segment. I heckin' love Arcade. I feel like that's not only true. That's not only true for Ultra Prime as well. Like just 100% with
not,
Jinx.
man.
I feel like so many teams rely on that pick as such an absolute crutch. It's so disheartening. I was even looking, right, because I think we're up to like 180 picks of it in LPL or something along those lines, and it's almost at a 60% win rate in 180 game sample size in pro play, and the most competitive region in the world. Like that just feels like such a problem to me.
Yeah, especially because like these weaker teams are getting the hands on it, right? Because sometimes you have picks that have high win rate, or low win rate, and it can be skewed by like sample size. But this is a massive sample size, and it's like at that high sample size, it's a mix of teams getting it, and like weaker teams will get it. Because that's the thing, like if weaker teams get something like Rumble Jungle, then obviously they're gonna have a worse win rate with that pick. But I mean, the Jinx is clearly just excelling no matter who has it, and yes, you can obviously deal with it. You can obviously find wins against it, but just the fact that it's so consistently finding these comebacks, and I think that the changes that we saw really allow comebacks to happen so much easier than we previously saw.
I mean, even in the LNG game today, I can't remember which one, where they fell behind so far early. They find one team fight, they start collecting all the objective bounties, and then suddenly out of nowhere they go from like 4K behind to they're actually up, and the bounties are still there, like off of all the massive power plays they just made with this. And it's like, yeah, it feels so easy to just come back into a game and find the win. So I don't know, kind of pivoting back to V5, the one thing I do want to say about V5 that will always stand out to me is I feel like V5 are the best team in terms of being able to force a lead. I feel like that's the one thing that stayed true for them.
Absolutely.
They are the one team who will slam their foot on the gas pedal when they find an advantage and like keep being like, hey, you have a sword, I have a much bigger sword. Bam, I'm going to kill you when they do it. And they win quick. They win exciting. Yeah. The issues are there. I still feel like V5 have not, throughout the split, been one of our better teams in terms of like map play. I feel like RNG have looked better than them. EDG and their wins look better than them. Even Weibo, I feel like, look more convincing than them. I feel like the one thing that V5 has going for them is the fact that they're just willing to force you to make choices. They're willing to push into your jungle, look for these really egregious picks. They're constantly looking for side lane picks. They're kind of the premier pick team in the LPL in my mind, with how much each individual moving part looks for these kills, because their team proximity stats actually aren't that high. They're not like linked up all the time looking for these big 5v5s. No, it's very like individual or 2-man or 3-man groups.
And we saw today, right? They were just constantly pressuring Ultra Prime. Just I like the forward percentages, especially in this last series. Like it's got to be incredible to look at those stats, because that's what happens when they get the lead, and they can also transition it into the late game. But then you see the falters in JDG when the macro decisions in late game team fighting are a little bit harder for them to execute, especially when they put a lot of eggs into the early game basket, it feels like.
Yeah, and I feel like the series, I mean, it's expected against Ultra Prime, but I think they did a pretty good job. And honestly, Carson Heckram was just really just charging down anyone who existed. I thought it was hilarious, the sort of double enchanter in the second game where he was just running anyone down.
So fast.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I just feel like I'm more convinced on RNG than any of the teams at the top end, but even they have their moments. But I feel like V5, I think individually a lot of the players have stepped up. I think Photic, expectations went super high for him, and he's really been delivering. I think the bot lane, honestly, like, I mean, it's hard to say because obviously you have Ricky in the roster, he's looking good, but I think the bot lane has just been performing so exceptionally. And I think even compared to bot lanes of other teams, like, I think they've been performing better than RNG bot lane and EDG bot lane. And then Rich as well. Like, I remember when Rich came on the roster, everyone was thinking, like, the general consensus was this is going to be like a side grade from Invincible. And then he's just been so much better than he was in the LCK, right? It's not just like, our expectations were wrong, but like he is just flat out like massively better than he was in the LCK.
No shout outs to PP God though. Come on, man.
I mean, I said triple P bot lane has just been on point, right? I think the bot lane 2v2 is really been exceptional. And again, it's been, we came into this, we have Rookie in the mid lane, you kind of expect him to be popping off, right? But I think the bot lane on top have really been the surprises for me.
And speaking of surprises, I guess it's not so much of a surprise with the legacy they have. RNG taking down the defending world champions in a tightly contested series just the other night, I guess just last night. How does this RNG squad just continue to make late season pushes like this? It is just inherently built into the organization, it feels like.
I feel like at this point, like now that they have had this core roster, just having like those systems set in place from last year make it very easy for them to, even if they have a slow start at the beginning of the split, right? I mean, like you know what winning formula was there before. So I think it's very easy to try and recreate that. I feel like in terms of like there were obviously individual form problems coming into the split. I think both Ben and their bot lane weren't showing up. But even in terms of picks, I wasn't a big fan of how RNG were drafting for a lot of the split. Their bot lane was super one-dimensional. I mean, they were literally only Jinx and Aphelios. They wouldn't ever branch out into like the Caitlyn's or it took a while to see the Zeri. And it was only Nautilus. Only Nautilus for me, nothing else. And I feel like now that we're starting to see their bot lane branch out a little bit, Gala having some really good Zeri performances in recent weeks. Obviously, Ben had already started to step up earlier on in the split. And I feel like the map play for RNG's always been there. That's one thing whenever we have like our caster meetings every week and we talk about who's the best teams, or is like, when RNG finds a lead, it might not be like the same.
I think we lost Lyric for a second.
Am I still gone? Am I still gone?
That's what he's left us with. Yeah.
I love the screenshot that we have right now. I don't know if I'll actually get it in the episode, but it'd be hilarious because his face is just completely frozen in mid-speak. Yeah, but well, I'm sure he had some big analytics there.
I think, he's going off making a fantastic point about how RNG have looked like the most complete team.
He's back.
I'm back?
I will say, I feel like one of the things is Shahu, but I feel like the Corki nerfs really helped this team.
Yes.
I feel like this team was over-prioritizing Corki so much. And it's like, Shahu can be such a massive force, right? There's such, super scaling picks you can pick in the side lanes, right? We've seen the Gwen in the top lane, things like Jace Graves. In the bot side, obviously Jinx goes without saying. It's like if you pick a mid, you can get control of the matchup and then lean that pressure sides. So easy to snowball. And then it's just like Corki duty. And I feel like that's how they lost against RA, right? Yeah. Strive was just bullying Shahu at the lane. I'm like Shahu's been so good in the mid lane. Put him on a pick that has agency. And I feel like, I don't know if it's the Corki nerfs that kind of prompted this, or it's just like they were naturally trending towards this, but they are looking so much better now that he's not on Corki duty, because they were just spamming that so many games in a row.
Yeah. It was, my God, it was so bad. It's not even like he's a bad Corki, but he is like the man who gets things done for them in the early game. Thank God that pick is gone. Ari's coming in. We're getting more LeBlanc. We're seeing more Vex. I think these are the picks where Shahu's really just going to be able to enable the rest of the team, because I feel like Wei has been the one point on the map where I don't think Wei's bad by any means, but I feel like Wei's definitely not performing like he did at Worlds, where it felt like a lot of games Wei was just single-handedly taking over for the side of RNG.
Yeah, and obviously, still a couple more weeks to pan all that out for RNG themselves. But we spent a lot of time talking about the top 4 teams. I want to turn the conversation over to our up-and-coming 2 teams that have taken the LPL spotlight, it seems, JDG and Top Esports. Let's talk about JDG first, because as we were kind of foreshadowing to, they did beat V5 in such dominant late-game fashion. It just feels like that essence of JDG is being pumped into this new iteration.
Yeah, I think Hope has really been really stepping up this roster. I don't know, it's kind of funny because we were talking a bit about this. I'm pretty sure we said Hope was the big hope, but he has really been delivering when the team needs. And they haven't always had the cleanest early games, but when they get to those late game team fights, that's where I think he's able to shine, and the team is sort of able to play around him.
Yeah, I feel like this team, Kelsey, when she featured, put it a good way that I really like how this roster building ended up panning out. Because I feel like one big problem JDG had last year was they didn't really have a lane that pulls pressure early, and they didn't have a late game carry. Now you kind of have both, because you got 369, who, again, is willing to play super aggressive early on, gives you a lane to play around in the early game, even in terms of just being able to pull jungle, and then, you kind of play and figure a plan around that is there. And obviously you have Hope to set up to be the big late game carry. Yagao's always been more of a role player, more of a backseat. With Xiaohu and Corki we were just talking about, it is Yagao and the Victor. Thank God, again, that's kind of being stepped away from in recent series as well. But I think they have a solid plan in terms of how they play out the early game. You see Kanavi put a lot of attention towards top to set 369 up. If it works out, I think JDG are also one of our cleaner teams in terms of snowballing their wins. And Missing as well has stepped up. Hope was never a player to any question for. Back in 2020, Hope was the best player for that EDG roster when EDG didn't make Worlds and weren't performing well. But I think Missing was probably my biggest question mark coming into the split, because Missing did not look good last year by any means. And even though Missing's still not a world beater support, I feel like in lane, they've been totally solid. And in team fights, Missing has impressed me. Getting vision, Missing does not impress me. He still does get quite out an absolute ton. But, he's hitting the engages. And that's all you need from Missing. Yeah. Hit the engages.
That's all you need in the LPL. That's one of the check cards that you need to be a support in the LPL. I got to turn the conversation over to Kanavi, though. This guy, when he first came to the LPL from Griffin, he had the essence of what we look for in LPL junglers. He had that aggression. He had that early game prowess, I felt like. And then now we don't have that same up-and-comingness that Kanavi has had because he's been around for a couple of years now on JDG. And I still remember the days when I thought this guy was like the next big, absolute smash every single person in LPL jungler. Didn't pan out that way, but they are starting to pick it up together, and it's more so through the team play instead of the individual play for Kanavi.
I feel like the Kanavi story is kind of funny because, like, he came into LPL 2020, and, like, I remember the first few weeks, everyone was so focused on, like, these early game ganking junglers and just pretty much sacking all your camps for your laners, and Kanavi came in and said, screw that. I'm full clearing. We're just going to pick a bunch of winning lanes. I'm going to invade. I'm not really going to interact all that much with my laners. And that's when the meta started transitioning to like Graves every game. And I think Kindred also was in meta back then. He was one of the big adopters of that.
Lilia maybe as well.
Lilia meta. And that's when, teams like Suiting as well got the big buff with, SOFM being so good at that style. But I feel like Kanavi was the first one in LPL to really come in and be like, hey, this is what's good. I feel like a more aggressive Kanavi was what we needed to see when the meta started transitioning away from that in 2021. And I feel like this is finally the split where Kanavi's found like a happy medium in terms of like being able to sacrifice for his laners, but also Kanavi typically still comes out ahead with a CS advantage. He plays a ton of different picks. I've been surprised to see him go towards things like the Rek'Sai, the Nidalee, like a lot of things that he wasn't willing to go to before. And I always feel like he had a pretty, not shallow pool in terms of what he could play, but he was one of those players who would like find comfort in a few picks and typically stick to them. And I feel like Kanavi has branched out in like so many different ways this year that we didn't see in the past.
Yeah, I think it's pretty cool. He's bringing out these picks when the situation asks for it, right? When there's an opportunity to sort of capitalize. I feel like it's one of those things where like having that balance of being aggressive, being able to play for your team when it needs it, but also maintaining like a lead. And he did bring that Graves out recently. He wasn't too successful, but I think like Hecarim in particular is like one of those picks that I feel like really personifies that style. Like you have strong ganks, great engage, but you farm fast, and I feel like it's risen so much in priority recently with the jungle changes, but also just like has so much agency in these games.
It's actually incredible. I was saying in the cast today, it just feels like the LPL jungler is Hecarim. Like you just find so many different synergies with the way that LPL playstyle is through the jungle. But let's go ahead and transition to top esports. You just coming off the cast, Lyric. They are the gatekeepers to LNG. Just seems like we have gatekeeping cards handing out in the LPL today.
Man, this team confuses me because none of their series are convincing whatsoever. Literally none of them. The EDG one, they should have lost. By all means, they should have lost the EDG one. The BLG one, a little bit more convincing. Today's, again, kind of back and forth. Game 2, a bit of a mess. Game 3, I feel like they benefit, again, so much off of the draft choices coming out from the side of LNG. I think it was their FPX series as well. Wasn't completely there. So I don't know. I don't feel like this team, I feel like it's really hard for me to put this team in a box in terms of like what they do well or poorly. They play very generally. Like I feel like a lot of their comps have champions that can like both side lane and team fight. Obviously today, like the Graves and the Rise being prominent ones where it's like, depending on the enemy laners, you win sides, or if not, you could always just opt into the 5v5. You have ability to make proactive plays in the early game with the Realm Warp. I feel like TN's like time split between lanes is like pretty even. I think he spends more time around mid than his side lanes, but I don't think he tends to go like top or bot more. It feels like this team's very pick lane, like strong lanes that they feel comfortable with. I feel like a lot of their comps I will look at sometimes be like, it doesn't make a whole ton of sense holistically, but all their lanes win, and it kind of sets up for their individualistic play style. And then, I mean, this team, I feel like they so many times constantly outplay in either skirmishes or team fights, just off of like insane mechanics or being able to kite out the fight correctly or whatever it is. So I don't know. Top esports are a bit magical. Ox, what's your read on the mojo?
Do you say they have some mojo?
Some mojo.
Right? I feel like it's one of those things where early in the split we were kind of talking about this, and I remember Munch saying like, as much as they were doing a bit crap at the time, like the top esports, like surely they could just turn around at some point. And they kind of have.
They got a jar of mojo somewhere in the back.
There's so much individual talent I feel in this roster, and it's been interesting to see Wayward being like put in as the starting top lane and performing pretty solidly. But I still feel like it's as you said, they're on a 6-win streak. I've watched the games, I've seen them play. I look at the schedule. It still feels weird.
They feel like a top team,
streak, right? Like they're literally currently 6th, and I'm still just like, I don't understand how they got there. I don't understand how they're on a 6-win streak. They are obviously, but it's still just
because they have Knight. Duh.
True.
He has
True.
literally been like the shining light for this team, and it, obviously, I mean, he's had such a great track record. But I just feel like Knight has had such an interesting year so far.
I think as well, a big thing is that their game score is actually really, really rough, right? They're 17 wins and 15 losses, and they actually, so like, you know how they're sixth in terms of like their overall series standing, but in terms of like their game score standing, they're tied with Rare Adam and OMG at 9th and 10th with 52%. I feel like it's one of those things where like, whenever they win a series, it really feels like back and forth, and then when they were losing series in a split, it was kind of just like getting a bit stomped. So yeah. Like that's the thing is we've basically seen only slightly more wins than losses in terms of games for them, and yet they're 8-4 in series. So definitely a bit of a weird one.
I do feel like the changes that came out though in terms of what they've improved at, I feel like Wayward makes them feel more at home. Again, I feel like Wayward plays plays more reminiscent to how 369 did, which was actually a huge part of how Top Esports played the game. You know, I think with how aggressively 369 played, no matter like if he was inting or not, I think they really relied on that pressure and having a constant point on the map that was willing to make those dives. So Wayward, as we saw today, right? Wayward's pretty much always like pushing forward under enemy turret, looking for these plays. But I feel like Wayward moves way more than 369 did. I've seen so many games where Wayward either is helping Tien invade the enemy jungle or hovering around mid. Two things 369 never did. And the other thing I think has obviously been Mark. I feel like even though I'm not sold on their mid game or like how they're winning a lot of their games, like it looks more solid and more stable than before with the previous iteration of the roster. Again, you're seeing a lot more moments where they are like conscious of the key abilities on the enemy team, whether it's like things like flanks or like an Orianna ball or things like this. And they're actually playing around them accordingly. Even today's game, playing around some of Doinby's Galley ultimates quite nicely, just being able to get out of there, kite back. And yeah, I feel like overall, this team has improved at some things. They're still not super convincing, but let's be real. No team in the LPL is super convincing right now.
Exactly. Hey, I would say
not.
Circle. That's all that. Hey, as a play-by-play, that's all I can hold on to in the LPL. Speaking of holding on to, we're going to go back in time a little bit. Last hit episode, interesting way to say that. We did discuss the patch jump from 12.2 all the way to 12.4 and how that would affect teams, what differences we might see, who is going to be most affected, who will take advantage of it. And I think we have seen a little bit of that play out. Obviously, the Gnar presence has shot through the roof, and we have seen a ton of other differences in pressure, and especially it feels like strategies have kind of gotten more unique through a lot of teams.
I feel like I don't know. I expect
you don't
more.
agree, Lyric. I agree.
So
I see you looking at me over there.
Funny enough, I was supposed to cast that game. I don't think I did in the end. I can't remember why. But I made a graphic of the changes, and me and Jake were like, "Man, there's so many changes. What do we do?" I'm like, "I'm just gonna put Gnar in, Renekton out, Corki out, Ari in," because I felt like that was pretty much what we would see in terms of like meta champions coming in and out, and I feel like that's actually what we've seen. We've seen Gnar come in top, we've seen Ari come in mid, and both Renekton and Corki are pretty much gone, and that is about it. I guess overall we're seeing more proactivity in terms of mid lane picks than before, since there isn't like this egregious like, oh my god, Corki's gonna scale. We need to match with Orianna or Victor. So now we are getting more Vex than before. We are getting more LeBlanc. We're seeing some Zoe, some Syndra, which makes it way more fun. Like, thank God we're at this meta. But I kind of feel like that's about it. So mid lane champion pool, definitely the big one.
Yeah, I feel like it's even because even in 12.2, it was kind of like RNG against RA in that 12.2 patch. I know they obviously picked Corki Victor, but I was kind of getting this feeling that, you know, these scaling mids that couldn't really handle priority just weren't really holding up, especially when there's things like Ryze being such high priority as well. It's like, you know, if you have scaling bot lane, scaling top lane, you have these picks like Gwen, Jinx, where you can, you know, if they get ahead, it's like game over. It just feels like, you know, yes, you can pick a scaling mid laner, or you can pick a mid laner that's proactive, still holds up reasonably well in the late stages, and then you make things happen, snowball your side lanes, and it's like, would you rather have, you know, a Jinx with 3 items or a Felios with 2 items? It's like a no-brainer, you know, and I feel like I expected so much more from the patch change, right, with all the bruise itemization changes. But the problem is, like, at the end of the day, you nerf the items, some of the champions are still just broken, right? Yeah. Turns out, oh no, my Godric is nerfed, but I'm still immortal for 5 seconds. Great, you know, I still win whenever I gank, and I can just duel basically anyone but Trundle, so it's a little bit like whatever, and I think you kind of nailed it in the head. Not that much has changed. I think as well, because we were so late to move patch, things start to leak in a little bit before we switched to 12.4. So I think Hecarim was a big one that teams had started to pick up on 12.3, 12.4, and then teams started to play it before we switched patch because they're like, oh, this is actually pretty good. then the patch hits and it's like even better. Like Hecarim is prioritized so heavily. I feel like the Hullbreaker thing as well is that like, Hullbreaker came around because people were like, oh, nerfs to the bruise itemization. Hullbreaker is actually a really good item, but then people were building it even before the nerfs came in because they're like, oh yeah, this is just good. It's like you get those things where like the system changes and things are actually like overlooked. It's forcing people to like look for new builds, new items, new options, new champions. But overall, it just felt very deflating. I'm like 12.4, 2 patch skip. It's gonna be different.
Where's my Renata?
Like, oh, no. It's like minor changes at best. But I will say that the mid pool change definitely comforting, especially when we saw like a couple of Azir games, right? I was dreading like a pushback to like Azir, Corki, Victor. That would be such a boring meta. But I mean, we saw that the other day was BLG, right?
Yep,
BLG against FPX. Oh my lord, man, that game. Man, it was a slow one. I tell you, it felt like we're watching the LCK. Not even that. I feel like LCK games are faster than that. It just felt like that old meta where it was so stale.
Yikes. That's a yikes. Why is nobody picking Renata? Why is this not happening? I need more of Renata Glass in my life.
I will say, right, I feel like Renata is this pick where you get out of lane, has some exceptional assets to it, right? The ultimate is can be so good, even if it doesn't necessarily connect. The fact that it's just like so much CC and it zones enemy team away is pretty amazing. Great for anti-dive. The W as well in the right scenario with the hyper carry. Beautiful. You can even use it like it doesn't have to be on a defensive hyper carry. Things on Aurelia. Like what are you supposed to do? Because Aurelia, you can't really CC her that easily because she always builds like Merc Treads and has nasty runes. And then you can't kill her because she has this W on her. So it's kind of nuts. But the problem is her cooldowns are so long in lane, right? So you can punish her. And the problem is the support meta at the moment in the LPL. Like, I thought we'd see more from the LCK, where they lean more towards these enchanters. Like, I feel like, if enemy team has something like Yumi, I mean, I feel Karma's, maybe a bit tentative because she has a lot more harass than you. But even then, I feel like you manage that lane. But, like, in the LPL, I was just thinking, if the enemy team picks Leona or Nautilus, they will just kill you again and again and again and repeat. And the thing is, you can't even use the W to turn around because, like, Leona will be 50% HP by the time you're dead. And then we'll just walk away, and and it's like, okay, you don't get a return kill. So I just feel like he's not suited to the meta in the LPL. As much as she is fun to watch, and we did obviously get a game with her, but I just think it's so volatile.
Yeah, volatility fits Renata a little bit more. So you shot me down before we started recording, Ox, but Lyric, maybe you can back me up here. Maybe I'm just dumb as well. What's up with my seemingly seen increase in double AP solo lanes here in the LPL? Am I onto something? Is my investigative journalism correct at all?
I actually don't feel like it's some like consorted plan or idea to going with double AP. I think you look at it,
I think it's all a conspiracy, Lyric. All right,
like you look at it, right? I mean, typically you're gonna end up right now with AP mids. I don't feel like there's any like over exceptionally strong like AD mid laners coming in, and obviously AP junglers not really in the best spot. The problem is when you look at top lane champion pool, like Gwen is by far the best top laner easily, and then I feel like picks like Kennen and Gragas are both just really good answers into a lot of other meta picks that we do see come out quite often. So the only place I'm not a huge fan of double AP is when your mid laner is like an assassin. Like we've seen LeBlanc or Ahri be paired with, maybe a Kennen in the top side or something like that. I'm like, I feel like enemy not prioritizing MR is so important for those champions in mid. But I feel like typically when we're seeing a lot of control mages, the Orianas, things like this come out, it's actually not too big of a deal. And I feel like for LPL, our teams have always cared more about their specific lane matchups, so that's why they're not going to go, I have this AP mid laner. Should I not take Kennen into this matchup? No, I'm going to smash this matchup.
especially with more, right? I feel like the more buffs, like an AD carry building more before was so underwhelming. They would just like get a hex drink and something that. It still felt like a little bit, but now like more is such a good item where I feel like you can affordably build it on. I mean, not even just AD champs. You can build it on like any sort of AD champ all, not just AD carries. I mean, like you can build it on bruises as well, and the shield is just massive. So I feel like if you end up having a game where you're taking, as you said, something like a LeBlanc and a Kennen, as an AD carry, I just build them more, and I feel kind of great about it. Plus, like cleanse is so. I feel like cleanse is just so frequently taken. Like any AD carry is like, they have 2 forms of CC I can cleanse. Boom, I'm taking it. Job's done. It just makes you feel so useless.
It really does. And it's been interesting. Something else also that you guys were kind of talking about earlier, and I want to dive a little bit more into. Maybe you guys can fix the issue. Maybe we can find a solution. what happens to Jinx? Does Jinx just stay this strong for the rest of 2022? Like, how do you tackle this problem? How do you break the character armor that is Arcane? You can't.
I was going to say, my only response to this, and not to Flame Riot, is I heckin' love Arcane. That's the only response I can.
Jinx is pretty good as well, right? I feel like I'm surprised to see Vi.
We saw a lot of Victor at the beginning of the season. Yeah, like, I mean, it's just.
Dude, I feel like they'll
Where's
nerf
the Heimerdingers?
They'll nerf Jinx, they'll buff Heimer, they'll buff... No, I feel
please,
like some of those things
please buff Heimer, please, I'm in, I'm down, I'm sold.
Yeah, I feel like we'll get to this point where they'll just go, oh, we should probably nerf Jinx, right? They'll be like, hit Q now does like half as much damage, like an auto attacks or something. They'll just
You're not allowed to take lethal tempo anymore. It's just not available.
Like I don't know, her auto attacks become a skill shot or something weird. I don't know. They'll just nerf her on the ground and she'll come out of the meta. Or I feel like what's weird is that we're just not seeing teams, especially like Corki's no longer a ban. That's kind of been freed up. And I know there's other things, like Zeri came in as a pretty high tier ban. But I feel like teams should just like ban it more frequently. I think there's a lot of scenarios that are like worried, oh, we ban Jinx, they have Aphelios. I feel like Aphelios, like, there's a lot more counterplay to him, right? Yeah. I feel like you can outrange him. Yeah. I feel like, there's a lot of scenarios where he doesn't interact with them well. I feel like if you have enough dive, like, sure, red-white can sometimes be hard to dive into him, but, like, there's definitely times where, like, there's a composition like Hecarim or, like, Galio Camille where it's, like, you just cannot exist.
Or even outranging him, right? Like, Jace top, Syndrome mid type situation.
Yeah, exactly.
I feel like Jinx, there's a lot less counterplay, and I think teams could just ban it. I particularly think stronger teams in the league, I said this point before, how like it feels like lower teams are picking up free wins with Jinx. I think higher teams should be more respectful and just going into these games, like, ban it away if you don't have like a clear strategy to deal with it. Because I think it leaves so much potential. You make one mistake, which over the course of a series, like, you are going to make mistakes, right? Even the better teams are going to, against much weaker teams, will at least make a mistake or two. And it leaves so much potential for it just to come back. So it's kind of weird that I feel like, we've had these 280 carriers that are so sort of prominent. We do get occasions where they're traded off and banned, but it just feels like they're left open so often when you could just not leave them open, right?
It feels as well like in the past, at least in my eyes, there's always been at least some sort of soft counter to every ADC. And against Jake, is there a counter? Like, is there an ADC that you can see on the list that is just like, okay, well, you're going to win every single matchup against Jinx? I don't feel like that's a possibility in this split.
Ban phase is counter. That's it.
That's the only counter. That's what I'm saying. There's no workable solution in the game.
I feel like unless you have like an extremely lopsided support matchup, not really. And heck, even then, right? I mean, you're Jinx. You switch to Fishbones and you just clear waves from afar.
And you just stay really far away from them.
Like, I think as Karma is a lane that we've sort of seen as like a decent answer, because you can just bully out a lane quite heavily. And then like if you're taking any of the safety tools for Jinx, like Tahm Kench or Thresh, you will have an awful time. If you're taking like Nautilus or Leona, then you kind of need jungle pressure to make that lane work. But even then, like, yes, it's gonna win out the laning phase, but it feels like still so volatile if you mess up. I feel like, Aphelios, there's definitely, the more team composition counters, I think, is the bigger issue for Aphelios at the moment. And then with Zeri, I feel like there's so many counters for Zeri. Like, sure, if Zeri gets the perfect scenario, this champion can absolutely pop off. In team fights, we've seen some monster moments, don't get me wrong. But also, like we saw today, it just get absolutely stomped into the ground by the Draven, right? When we saw Photic pick that up.
That was so brutal.
We saw that comp from EDG against Gala, where they had, like, Galio, Camille, Hecarim, Tristana, Nautilus. It's like, you cannot play the game against that. It's like, you just need... like, Tristana's great into it, Draven's great into it. These champions that can just jump on her or get in range of her and just beat her up, or bully at her out in lane. And then on top of that, if you have team fighting tools that, like, just lock a target down, point and click, you can deal with it. I think that's the thing. It's like, in team fights, if the enemy team has Aphelios or Zeri and we have the right tools, I'm like, cool, whatever, we can handle this. I feel like with Jinx, it's like, even if you have the right tools, if you just mess one thing up, you've made one mistake, it's like, okay, we've lost, game over, you missed a skill shot, boom, Jinx, Pat has taken over,
Whoopsies! Well, hey, it's always a fun conversation. I'm glad we can get a little bit of a recap on seeing what that 2-patch jump really actually did. The next part of this, though, I will say it's a little bit of a two-pronged one for me, because I think there's an analytical side to the LPL, and then there's a gut feeling side to the LPL, all right? And I want you guys to bear with me with that one, because I got to see what role is the strongest in the LPL. Now, bear with me, the analytical side of it, what role in terms of champion pools is the best, what gets the most value out of the position? The emotional one is which role is filled with the best players in the LPL. So let's start with the analytical one. We'll let you get your big brainness out here and see what you guys think, because I have my own opinions and I know it's really big brain. So I'll make sure to have that at the end to cap off anything that you guys don't say.
Funny enough, I think the most impactful role right now is Jinx. I think it's Jinx.
It's like I feel like this. I feel like every team. I feel like every team that's like on the lower end, I always like it's like OMG with like Abel when he's on the right pick, or like Hope from JDG. I mean, they're not on the lower end, but still, I feel like, you know, Betty. I feel like there's so many players. I mean, Puff and Southland as well. Elk on Ultra Prime. Yeah. I feel like I'm looking at all these teams and I'm like, if they get Jinx, right? I see the hope. They get Jinx in the, and then I just think they can definitely carry. And I think the thing is just like she's such a like Aphelios. I think there's a lot of skill expression with Aphelios. I think like top 80 carries in Aphelios, like they can really find windows to carry. But I feel like every 80 carry basically in the league, or at least most of them, can pick Jinx and carry a game. It's just so, oh, I stand at max range and auto attack people. Oh, I get a reset and lethal tempo stacked, and now I carry. It's
I get movement speed and Gale Force to play aggressively. No way. The amount of aggressive Gale Forces in the last like 2.5 weeks have been insane. I love it. Our ADCs are filled to the brim with confidence. I was looking at Elk's solo kills. He has the most solo kills and also the most solo deaths because of plays where he'll just throw himself forward to try to go for a Gale Force kill and somehow does it.
If none of them are going to be watching this, I don't think any of the Chinese AD carry pros are actually watching this. But if they are, my advice, if you want to get picked up to a big team, right, you want to be on the top 5 next split, just tell your team to first pick Jinx every single game. Get your highlight montage together, right? Oh, look at this comeback. Oh, it was big carry coming out.
Throw in some scenes from Arcane here or there. Get some of that stuff in there.
You know, we see a situation where one of the players in the higher teams, you know, maybe they retire, move to a different roster, and then you're like, hey, I'm available. Why don't we pick up this guy, right? And suddenly we have a situation where Elk is back in the top team, right?
Okay, I'm ready for Ox to become a player agent. He's truly changing careers right now.
He's really made that next
you
jump.
Have to think about, right? It's you know, as much as it's important for teams to win, and as a player, your focus should be making your team win. There's also like the dark side of it, where it's like, is it more important for my team to win or me to look good? Because like when it comes to the next split, if your team wins, that's obviously a positive. But if you look like you're Elo Hell'd on your team, then man, it's so free to get like a big roster jump just by looking like, damn, this player, you know, his team lost like 16 out of the 17, like 15 out of the 16 games, but damn, did he look good?
Ox is exposing what kind of player he was.
What happens when you lose with Jinx, though? Is that like double negative? Is that like you get thrown in the bin in the trash?
But I want to say,
if you lose with Jinx, it's impressive. So fair play.
It's impressive. I see.
I mean, to be fair to Seriously, though, I feel like it's actually really hard to look like bad when even losing on Jinx. Like, I feel like in a lot of games where you see the Jinx team lose, the Jinx team looked like the most impactful player, looked like the best player. So.
This is it. I got the second thing, right? First pick Jinx, and then have your support play Tom Kench. You can no longer miss position, right? It's literally impossible. You have a get out of jail free card, and it's like the only mistake you can make on Jinx, I feel, is just mispositioning horrifically, and now it's impossible. So boom, there you go.
I want to.
The Exodia comp is 2 pieces.
You are now on a top team. Congratulations to Elk. He just got signed for RNG. Good job.
I want to apologize to everyone out there listening to this, not episode of The Last Hit, this episode of us complaining about Jinx for 30 minutes.
Well, we've already established the analytical side of the LPL says that Jinx is the most busted role in League of Legends right now. So at least we came away with that. But I guess then I want to transition to the next part of the question, saying, what role has the most impactful players? Is it just 80s here? We're just going all. Is it just Jinx, the actual player? Like, there's no more players in the LPL. It's just Jinx.
Nope. This one is free low, dude. This one's free answer. Okay. Come on. We all know the answer here.
And?
I feel like, do you want me to go first?
You guys are like on a nervous first date. It's like, who wants to go first?
I feel like it's mid. I feel like mid is so impactful right now.
Hey, you got the proud dad.
You look at FPX when like Gory was kind of struggling in lane, and like how doomed that team looked. Because like I feel like Hung was doing so well, Shalahu sick, right? I feel like LWX was at least solid, and this team just felt like so useless because they had a mid laner who was straight. And like, even look at RNG against RA. I'm going back to that one again. When Xiaohu was on a pick where he couldn't have impact and Strive was able to gap him, it's just like the team fell apart. I feel like mid is just, especially, I think a big thing is, right, since we've had the TP changes, previously, if your mid matchup wasn't favorable, it's fine. You have your top lane, you can TP, it can solve problems there. They can sort of like, enemy team aggresses too hard bot, you TP behind them, boom. That's no longer a thing. So it's like top lane has become even more of an island. And as a result, mid is like so impactful. Because if you roam bot as a mid laner, there's little recourse. And even against the other mid laner, right? If you're playing Ryze, you get prio. Let's say you're against a Victor, you get prio early. You roam bot for a dive. Like Victor can only TP the tower. He can't TP behind you. So you can like back away and bait the TP, or you can get the dive done quickly and back away. And it's like, before, the threat of being TP'd like from a ward behind you was so damning, because like suddenly if like, I don't know, a Camille turns up behind you, she gets a double kill, it's like, okay, game's doomed. That's no longer the case.
I also feel like just looking at quality of player, right? I mean, you look at our mid laners in the LPL. Scout, Xiaohu, Rookie. I mean, even Fofo not having the same split, I still feel like has been good. Angel's been stepping up. You just hit on RA, so Strive, like Doinby. There's Knight. There's too many players.
There's too many,
and then,
man.
You kind of look at the teams lower in the standings, right? And I don't feel like these mid laners are like, egregiously terrible or anything, but they don't stack up to, all those legends. You look at, obviously LGD bringing back Jay, before that having Yeji. I think both were solid, but again, not the same as like Rookie, Knight, these guys. Ultra Prime with Cryin, anyone's legend with Forge. I feel like just
with Yukal.
Yeah, just like the player quality in LPL for mid lane is so stacked. We have like 8 or 9 world-class mid laners, which I mean, to be fair, I guess the LPL would take some of those world-class mid laners.
Hey, all right.
Thanks, Rookie.
Whoa.
Thanks, Rookie.
It is a very stacked role. Also, the fact that it's so flexible and there's so many different styles of play you can have, and we see it rampant throughout the entirety of the LPL, right? You have the huge mid-jungle teams. You have the 1-3-1 teams. You have the teams that like to focus in the mid lane and put a lot of resources there. And that changes from here and there, right? Teams are also adapting through the season. And I think, as you guys say, I that was my choice as well. So I guess we're all three on the same choice.
I told you, man, Freelo. It was Freelo.
It literally is just Freelo, because you see how impactful the early game decisions from a mid-game standpoint can be, and how crucial the mid-jungle duo has been to any success, it feels like, in any matchup. We are constantly focusing on the jungle because it is the precipice of action. It is the aggressive standpoint that the LPL likes to take.
True.
Yeah, I feel like, is there a flip side to it? I feel like maybe it's, I think it just goes back to Jinx point that like, it doesn't matter what AD carry you have as long as I have Jinx. Like, okay. I feel like because, support can really make an impact mid, jungle, obviously, mid-jungle, really important. I feel like top lane as well. We've seen some big top lane gaps in games where it's been really impactful. But I feel like it's just, I don't know. Is there any, this is going to be a harsh question. Is there any AD carry who you think, if they're on Jinx, couldn't carry a game? Because I feel like I look at a lot of the rosters and I'm like, yeah, they probably could. They probably could.
Wait, no, I have one. I have one.
Okay, who's the one?
Team WE, either one of their 80 carries. I'm sorry. Sorry.
You know what?
Yikes!
I think that's fair. Do you think everyone else is safe though?
I think literally everyone else is safe.
Just the one. I
mean, right? Even like Eric has like shown up as a late game carry. Pop has shown up. I was behind.
Like that.
No, but that's my point. Is everyone else
pretty good as well when he had that comeback series as well. Yeah, I actually think
it's kind of just WE.
So I'm glad that you guys...
I'm not sure about Uzi though, just because we haven't seen him. He has to show up if he wants to carry. But yeah.
Hey, he's still sitting there at the top of the stats, all right? Every time I go check ADC stats, he's up there because of the one.
Don't bring it up, Larry. Don't bring it up.
No, I just want to know what Ox was going to pivot into, where we're like talking about mids, and he's like, do you guys, is there anyone bad on Jinx?
Is there anybody that can't do it at all?
Did you just want me to flame? Is that all you wanted?
Is there anything?
Yeah, I want you to get the people going, right? I want you to be hypey.
No one knows what it means. It gets the people going. But seriously, I love that you guys took the analytical side of it and went meme with the Jinx, and then for the emotional side of it, it was just straight analytics. Mid lane is the most impactful.
The Jinx point is dead serious. Yeah, I wish it was a joke.
I wish too.
I literally have the rosters in front of me, and I'm looking, I'm like, man, every single other than every single one, man. Like really, it's kind of mind blowing. So. Yeah.
Well, hopefully teams will start maybe banning Jinx. Who
Well,
knows?
if anyone from the Riot Balance team is watching, I feel like, again,
Yeah.
there's another call out where I don't know if there will be, but if anyone from the Riot Balance team is watching, please nerf Jinx. You know,
Shoot
this is an
your
appeal
shot,
to you.
all right?
Please.
Shoot your
And the thing is,
shot.
right, we've hit 12.5 already on live. And then they've said that's going to be like a month-long patch, right? Because I'm not sure if the X reasoning, but they said that's going to be a month patch before 12.6. And they didn't nerf Jinx on 12.5, right? So we're a long way away.
And, I mean, heck,
Arcane
we're a long
Season
way
2
away.
coming soon.
We're 2 weeks away from LPL playoffs. So that
are.
means,
We are.
that's probably the patch we're going to
Yep.
be on. So
Yep.
all
Hey.
the same.
Will
And-
Jinx be nerfed for MSI? Probably not.
The
at this
world
rate,
may
honestly.
never know.
Actually, I feel like there's two sides to it. Because one, I'd love to see Jinx nerfed. But the other thing, oh man, it's like getting massive changes right before like an international tournament. Always good fun. Always good fun.
I
why don't we
love these team fights and stuff. The late game ADC battles have been so breakneck and it has been super
Wait,
fun.
just
What?
real quick, so we could just not complain and like pivot it somewhere. I will say, I'll give out what I want to see in terms of AD carries in the meta. Bring me back to 2017. Jhin, Ashe, Varus. You put them
Yeah, I'll take the
alongside
Jhin.
the Zyras, the Misfortunes, the Malzahars. Those were the fun metas. Because at level 6, literally everyone is going to go bot. Everyone. You just have so much guaranteed fight potential. It was amazing. It was my favorite meta to coach in. Please bring that back.
I would
tell you what,
want
I
to
will
see.
say, at times I didn't enjoy it as a support player because you just got one shot. Like no matter what champion you're playing, you have aftershock as well. But like Xayah and
Doesn't
Kai'Sa
matter.
meta, dude, I swear down. Like you have aftershock up, you're level 3, you're Leona with your W, fully stacked passive from Kai'Sa, you die. Like 7 feathers from Xayah, you die. But still, it was just skill expressive. I feel like that was such a fun meta. Like I'd much rather see those two than Aphelios Jinx. I think Aphelios is actually okay, right? For the in this current form, I think that the craziest thing is when you look at like the patch notes for Aphelios. And you look at how much he's been nerfed since, like, remember when he was, like, super broken?
Yes.
Yeah.
The range
Like-
of his ulti. Jesus.
Dude,
Yep.
the range of his ulti, like, I swear his ulti is Infernum Ultimate used to just do, like, double damage compared to what it does now. Like, and you've seen
And
it,
then
like,
you
one-shot
still see
people.
the clips like Viper blowing people up.
It's kind of mind-blowing, and it kind of makes you think back, like, at the time, how unbelievably strong this champion was, right? And I feel like a lot of the thing back then is where it talks about, he has range limitations, just outplay it. If you think about his ult being, like, even longer range, man, it's a little counterplay, so...
Yeah, absolutely.
I don't miss that.
Yeah.
I'll tell you that much.
Not at all. Well, I love that you guys were starting to talk about getting to the end of the split because as we got to talk about something serious, all right? Something deadly, deadly serious. I'm going to come up with something spicy. The conversation is about who in the LPL is absolutely Elo Hell'd, who cannot make anything happen for their team, even though they are the shining stars.
All right.
I'm going to come up with
Hard
something
move.
spicy first. No. This is my time. Doing B is Elo Hell'd. That's all. Drop the mic.
Okay, well, firstly, I'm going to say hard mode for your lyric. Don't say an 80 carry, because...
Don't say anything.
Come on, guys. My answer is so obvious. My answer,
Oh, no. Is it another easy dub or what?
dude, I'm just saying he's only played one series. The guy who is Elo'd hell is my boy Mole coming in.
I knew it was coming.
Dude, did you see that Zika engaged
Did you see?
under turret as Camille, like jumping in by himself while all the other members were walking away? Yes, you saw it because you were there. And me and you were both like,
I was
what
there.
is going on?
What is happening?
This was a free win. And then game 2, pulling the Elder. What are you doing? Your jungler just died because he just trolled in. What is going on? I don't care if it's one series. I don't care if you wanted a serious answer, because the answer of my heart, which I think is on this side, is Mole.
I'm glad
so
you
much-
knew where your heart was.
There's so much delusion coming in here, honestly.
Just so much.
Between you two. It's kind of tricky, right? I feel like, especially ignoring 80 carries where they're just playing Jinx, I feel like I would probably be leaning towards maybe like Shallow. I feel like it's kind of Elo Hell'd. I feel like, I mean, Rare Adam aren't exactly in a bad place, but I feel
I
like
would say
Leanne has
Leanne.
been,
Yep.
yeah, Leanne's been really good, and it's like the team performance hasn't reflected that.
I feel like
if
Leanne's
he
a
was on
top
better team.
jungler. Like 100%.
Yeah, for sure. I think junglers looked like kind of weak overall. I feel like even some of the higher tier teams, I feel like the junglers, like I think like way on RNG, I think he's looked
Yeah.
kind of unconvincing. But
Yeah.
I think Leon has looked really, really good. And I think if he was on a different team, then he would be at the top, right? I feel like his drive has been pretty good, especially since his debut. But yeah, I'd say Leon's probably my my first pick, and then like honorable mention, Shallow. I would have said Tarzan, I think.
Tarzan not doing
until
me?
the
Come
recent
on,
series.
man.
I agree.
Yeah, until the recent series.
Yeah.
I feel like he looked really... That's the sad thing. It feels like it's way down on him. He was so Elo Hell'd. He's now just like... You know, when you've played like 17 solo queue games in a row, and you just have these games where you're just losing despite anything you do, and then by the end of it, you just crush.
You're just like, I don't care.
You're the Inter.
So I said doing me at the beginning of the conversation, but I will actually change it. Well, add another one at least, but... Betty for anyone's legend, man. Betty has had
Zox
man. I'm hoping so.
Dude,
I will say Betty has shown up this split.
I agree.
And unfortunately for him, he's on anyone's legend.
Yeah, but I feel like one of the things was I feel like Betty was one of the early adopters of just pink. There was like this big spree of games like he was just picking Jinx. Like,
Don't
every
do
game.
that to him. Don't put him in
Dude,
that corner,
dude,
okay?
It was like so many games in a row. He was just picking Jinx. And he was one of the early adopters of pick Jinx every game. And then teams started to stop him getting it, and it's been a bit, you know. Hey, I think he's still been solid. I definitely think like it's a fair point, but you know, I feel like there's so many 80 carries. You can be like, dude, look at this game. He was on Jinx, and then he carried, and then his team into him, and I'm like,
I also feel like for AL specifically, I actually feel like Chocho does a lot for that team. So
for sure,
you know,
100%.
and this doesn't take away from the Betty point either, Mazel. I actually think Betty has. This has by far been Betty's best split in the LPL, and just overall, I feel like him and Chocho are working so well together. Chocho is such a fun player to watch.
He's a Chad.
Shun is maybe my honorable mention. I feel like Shun's been hit or miss. I feel like overall he's mostly had good series, and he was by far the best player. I think like throughout. If you have like an average of IG games, he was like the big reason they even have a lot of their wins. But he also does have very. I mean, again, him like over aggressing in base in their last series and dying right as Elder came up. Like he has moments like that. So, but I think Shun with a better team would work much better. IG obviously are still just so young and so new in terms of their roster and their shot calling and things like this. So, but
I feel like
I'm
Shun
still a
with the
Shun
team
fan today.
Shun with a team on the same page, I feel like would go a long way. But also, I feel like if you're one of these teams that are on the lower end, I would much rather have a jungler like Shun who's like gonna potentially win you some games you wouldn't otherwise. And yeah, sure, he's gonna lose you some games, but like you're probably losing some of those games anyway, right? Real talk, IG, the sort of lower end. So I'd rather have a jungler who's like, I mean, it's kind of like TT last split, right? You know, when there was those games where it really felt like
Xiaopeng.
Yeah, with Xiaopeng, like I feel like, you know, if TT last split didn't have Xiaopeng, man, how depressing would their games have been?
Man, I feel like we have a jungler like that every year. 2020, we had Rogue Warriors. They had Haro, who was EDG's former jungler from Worlds 2018, I believe. We have Xiaopeng last year. Now we have Shun. I love it. I agree, though. If you're like a bottom 5 team, you pay all the money in the world for Shun because, hey, maybe he'll get you into playoffs. Maybe he'll get you enough wins to at least get to 10th. And if not, he'll at least get you enough wins to not be 16th or 17th. And you know what?
That's the goal.
I feel like that's what WE are kind of lacking. Like, I feel like we just haven't seen them really do anything. And it's been kind of, I feel like it's just been kind of sad because it just feels like, you know, I'd rather a team be very proactive, lose quickly, or like find an advantage. And I feel like even, you know, IG, when they had that series where we saw like the Nidalee and stuff, and it felt like constantly, despite they had that massive lead, like I think that was against EDG, right?
Both games
they had a
against
massive
EDG.
lead. And it felt like, you know, there was definitely potential for them to throw the game away. Enemy team had like Corky Jinx, and they did end up losing. And it was kind of, it wasn't too much of a surprise, despite the fact they had like a 5k gold lead. But I was like, dude, I love the fact that they're just like, let's go for it, let's make it happen.
Yeah.
And I feel like WE just haven't really done that. They kind of just floundered a lot.
That proactivity is so key in the LPL. But guys, it has been our time. That is another episode of The Last Hit under our belts. I want to thank Ox for joining us for this episode. Been a while since we had you on, buddy, so it was always good to have you. Lyric, I love you. I hate you. Thank you so much for being here.
That's fair. That's fair.
Here with me every single week as we work through this season together. Everyone for joining in, thank you so much. Make sure you go follow the @LPL English Twitter and the YouTube. Make sure you catch all the content from the team. And Ox, I guess. Not Lyric, though. Don't follow Lyric. He has too many followers already. But again, this has been another episode of The Last Hit here on the 6th of March. And we'll see you next week for yet another one.